McCoy Wayne Westbrook, March 9, 2016. Westbrook was a mass murderer who killed 5 people, his ex-wife, her female roommate, and 3 men on November 13, 1997, in Channelview, Texas, part of the greater Houston area. His trial took place in 1998. Because Westbrook had a low IQ, his defense attorneys appealed to the jury for leniency. The prosecution countered by arguing that Westbrook knew his actions were wrong, making him fully accountable. They immediately pursued the death penalty. The jury agreed with the prosecution, found Westbrook guilty, and recommended the death sentence. On September 2, 1998, he was officially sentenced to death. That same day, Westbrook entered death row. He was first held at the Ellis unit, but in 1999, he was moved to the Ellen B. Polonsky unit. Although questions were raised about his mental capacity and expert testimony from Dr. George Denkowski was contested, Westbrook was never granted a new trial. On March 9, 2016, just hours before his scheduled execution, the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals denied the final appeal that focused on concerns about his possible intellectual disability. Later that evening, Westbrook was executed by lethal injection. His death was recorded at 8:04 p.m. His last words were, "I want to say that I am sorry for the pain that I have caused you people. I am sorry that I cannot bring everybody back. I wish it could be different." Adam Kelly Ward, March 22, 2016. On June 13, 2005, Adam Ward was outside washing his car when he noticed Michael Walker, a 44-year-old code enforcement officer, taking photographs of his property in Commerce, Texas. For the previous 5 years, Ward's home had been repeatedly cited for various city code violations, and Walker's presence that day irritated him, according to testimony. The two exchanged a few words, with Ward telling Walker to leave. Walker then returned to his truck, moved it across the street, and called the police. Meanwhile, Ward rushed inside, retrieved a handgun from his bedroom, and came back outside. He opened fire on Walker, chasing him as the officer tried to take cover behind his truck. Witnesses later testified that Walker attempted to hide both behind and underneath the vehicle. When he made an effort to run down the street, Ward shot him again, ultimately firing 9 rounds in total. Michael Walker, who became known by his nickname Pee-wee, died at the scene shortly after his father, Dick Walker, arrived. Dick, who was serving with the Commerce Emergency Corps, reached the location just moments before his son's passing. Michael Walker had once worked in construction before being employed as a code enforcement officer for the City of Commerce. At the time of his death, he was living with his father in Commerce, where Dick Walker operated the family's funeral home. Michael also left behind 2 children, a son, Donovan, and a daughter, Marissa, who resided with him and his father. Ward's last statement was, "This is wrong what's happening. This is not a capital case. It never was a capital case. I had never intended to do anything. A lot of injustice is happening in all of this. I'm sorry things didn't work out. May God forgive us all." Pablo Lucio Vasquez, April 6, 2016. On April 18, 1998, Vasquez attended a party in Donna, Texas, accompanied by his 15-year-old cousin, Andres Rafael Andy Chapa. During the gathering, Vasquez consumed both cocaine and alcohol, becoming heavily intoxicated. It was there that he encountered 12-year-old David Cardenas. Later, while the two were walking away from the party toward a nearby house, Vasquez suddenly struck Cardenas on the head with a pipe and slit his throat. With Chapa's help, he dragged the body across a 4-lane road to a nearby field, leaving behind a visible trail of blood. Once there, the crime escalated in brutality. Vasquez robbed the victim of his valuables, then mutilated the body, cutting off one arm, partially severing another, removing patches of skin from Cardenas's back, and even scalping him. In a shocking act, Vasquez drank the victim's blood before attempting to cover the remains with sheets of aluminum. He also tried unsuccessfully to decapitate Cardenas using a shovel. In the aftermath, 3 relatives of Vasquez and Chapa became involved, attempting to help conceal the crime. Vasquez was eventually tracked down and arrested in Conroe, Texas, after authorities received an anonymous tip about his whereabouts. During police questioning, he gave a disturbing explanation for his actions, claiming that it was the devil who instructed him to remove Cardenas's head. In his last words, Vasquez apologized to the victim's family. Barney Ronald Fuller, Jr., October 5, 2016. Fuller lived near Lovelady, a rural community in Houston County, East Texas. Known for frequently firing weapons on his property, he often clashed with neighbors who felt threatened by his behavior. Among the most outspoken were Nathan and Annette Copeland, who accused him of shooting their electric transformer and repeatedly called deputies to complain about his gunfire. Despite their reports, no action was taken against him. The tension escalated further when, on January 1, 2001, Fuller phoned Annette and chillingly told her, "Happy New Year, I'm going to kill you." That threat resulted in a criminal charge of making a terroristic threat. 2 years later, on May 13, 2003, Fuller, then 44 years old, received a court letter related to those charges. Enraged, he sent his wife and children away and began drinking heavily. Around 1:30 a.m. the next morning, he armed himself and walked a short distance to the Copeland residence. Standing outside, he unleashed approximately 60 rounds from an AR-15 rifle, reloading 3 times. He then forced his way inside through the back door and continued his rampage with a pistol, reloading the weapon twice. In the master bedroom, he shot 43-year-old Nathan Copeland 3 times with the pistol, although Nathan was already fatally wounded from a rifle shot to the head. Annette attempted to call 911 from the bathroom, but the operator only heard a man say, "Party's over, bitch," followed by gunfire, before the line went dead. Annette was shot 3 times in the head and face. Fuller then moved through the house, targeting the couple's children. He fired at 15-year-old Cody at least 3 times, accusing the boy of lying about him in court. Cody survived, though he was hit twice in the shoulder. Fuller next entered 11-year-old Courtney's room, but she had hidden in the darkness, and he was unable to find her. Before leaving the home, Fuller turned on the kitchen stove, apparently attempting to start a fire. Although he had also brought a shotgun with him, it was never used. After Fuller fled, Courtney went to check on her family and quickly realized her parents had been killed. Cody managed to call 911 using his mother's cell phone after discovering the house phone line was dead. Meanwhile, Courtney turned off the stove to prevent an explosion. After contacting their grandparents, the children were taken to safety when the grandparents arrived at the scene before the police. While officers investigated the house, gunfire rang out again from the direction of Fuller's property. Deputies rushed there to find that Fuller had barricaded himself inside. He held them off for several hours before finally surrendering once a SWAT team arrived. In July 2004, Fuller pleaded guilty to capital murder for killing 2 or more people during the same criminal episode. When the time came for his execution, Fuller deliberately avoided making eye contact with the witnesses, among them the 2 surviving children of Nathan and Annette Copeland. As the lethal injection process began, he made a brief remark directed at the officials carrying out the procedure. His death took longer than anticipated, prolonging the final moments inside the chamber. He had no final words. Christopher Chubasco Wilkins, January 11, 2017. In October 2005, 37-year-old Wilkins walked away from a Houston halfway house, stole a truck, and made his way to Fort Worth. There, he encountered 40-year-old Willie Freeman, who offered to sell him drugs. Together with his supplier, 33-year-old Mike Silva, Freeman tricked Wilkins into paying $20 for a piece of gravel instead of cocaine. When Wilkins realized he had been duped, both men laughed at him. Despite the incident, Wilkins and Freeman continued using drugs together in the following weeks. Freeman eventually apologized and gave him some drugs to make amends, but according to Wilkins, he had already resolved by then that he would kill Freeman. On October 27, Wilkins lured Freeman with a story about having guns and drugs stashed on the west side of Fort Worth. Silva agreed to drive both men the next day. Once they were on a deserted road, Wilkins, seated in the back, shot Freeman in the back of the head. Silva immediately stopped the car and tried to flee, but became tangled in his seatbelt. Wilkins shot him in the neck and head, killing him. Taking over the driver's seat, Wilkins cut Silva free and dumped both bodies in a roadside ditch. Roughly a week later, Fort Worth police arrested Wilkins after 2 high-speed chases that ended in a crash. He was driving Silva's car, which bore a pentagram carved into the hood matching one of his tattoos. During questioning, Wilkins confessed not only to killing Freeman and Silva, but also admitted to murdering Gilbert Vallejo in Fort Worth the day before on October 26. He claimed he shot Vallejo after the man cursed at him in Spanish while he was using a payphone outside the bar. Wilkins also confessed to a string of other murders and crimes across several states, though most could not be corroborated. At trial, his defense argued that these unverified confessions undermined the reliability of his admissions to killing Freeman and Silva. While awaiting trial in jail, Wilkins attempted to prepare for an escape by swallowing a handcuff key and fashioning a homemade knife. On the stand, Wilkins said he murdered Freeman and Silva simply because they mocked him after tricking him with the fake drug sale. He expressed no concern about receiving a death sentence. He bore numerous tattoos linked to Satanism and white supremacist groups, though he dismissed them as remnants of his youth and claimed they were mostly for intimidation to ward off other inmates. He had no final words. Terry Darnell Edwards, January 26, 2017. On Monday, July 8, 2002, 28-year-old Terry Edwards and his 31-year-old cousin, Kirk Darnell Edwards, entered a Subway restaurant located in a strip shopping center in Balch Springs, a suburb of Dallas, just as the store was opening. They fatally shot manager Tommy Walker, 34, and employee Michael Goodwin, 26, in the head at close range. They stole $3,000 and fled the scene. Witnesses in a nearby dental office heard the gunfire and immediately called 911. Police arrived in time to see two men running from the restaurant and one of them tossing an object into a trash can across the street. Terry Edwards was apprehended at the scene. A .38 caliber handgun recovered from the trash can was determined to be the weapon used in the murders. Upon his arrest, Terry admitted his involvement in the robbery and confirmed possession of the stolen money and the handgun. However, he claimed that a man he knew only as T-Bone had carried out the shootings and handed him the gun after leaving the store. Kirk Edwards surrendered to the Dallas Police Department the following day. Terry had been fired from the same Subway location in June for stealing from the cash register and had previously been terminated from another Subway for similar theft. His criminal history included felony convictions for theft and possession of cocaine with intent to deliver. He had served roughly 2 years of a 5-year sentence from 1997 to 1999 and was on parole at the time of the killings. During the guilt-innocence phase of Terry's trial, the only defense witness was state forensic analyst Vicki Hall. She testified that Terry had been tested for gunshot residue when arrested and none was detected on him. Under Texas law, a participant in a capital murder can be found guilty and sentenced to death even if they did not fire the fatal shot. Additional testimony came from Michael Wiest, who recounted that on April 26, 2002, he was in a Subway in Fort Worth when two men entered acting suspiciously. One man drew a gun and ordered staff to lie down while the other, identified as Terry Edwards, took the surveillance tape. As they fled, they nearly hit a uniformed deputy sheriff who aimed his gun and commanded them to stop. In November 2003, a jury convicted Terry Edwards of capital murder and sentenced him to death. The Texas Court of Criminal Appeals upheld both the conviction and death sentence in March 2006, and all subsequent state and federal appeals were denied. Most of his appeals challenged errors in jury selection, and his lawyers argued he should not be executed because he was not the triggerman. Kirk Edwards, with prior felony convictions for burglary and theft, was convicted of aggravated robbery and sentenced to 25 years in prison. Terry Edwards' execution had initially been scheduled for May 2016, but the state postponed it to October due to the absence of his attorneys and his request for new counsel. It was later delayed again to January to give his new attorneys additional time to review the case. On the day of his execution, multiple late appeals to the U.S. Supreme Court caused a roughly 4-hour delay. After the court reviewed and denied the appeals around 9:30 p.m., Edwards was asked if he wished to make a final statement. He responded, "I'm at peace with God. I hope you'll find peace in this." Lethal injection was then administered and he was pronounced dead at 10:17 p.m. Rolando Ruiz Jr., March 7, 2017. In 1992, Michael Rodriguez hired a hitman, Rolando Ruiz, to murder his wife, Teresa Rodriguez. By the winter of 1995, Rodriguez had pleaded guilty to capital murder. During the trial, there was sufficient evidence for the jury to determine that Ruiz was hired by Michael and his brother, Mark Rodriguez, to kill Teresa for $2,000. Ruiz carried out the killing by shooting her in the head at close range with a revolver. He paid the hitman $2,000 to have his wife killed, explained Judge Mark Lutjan, who had formerly served as a prosecutor. Judge Lutjan had been the prosecutor responsible for sending 5 men, including Michael Rodriguez and his brother, to prison for their roles in plotting Teresa's murder. Mark Rodriguez received a life sentence, while Rolando Ruiz, the man who actually pulled the trigger, remained on death row. You have to wonder who is worse, the person who has a loved one killed or the person who will kill someone for money, Lutjan remarked. Teresa Rodriguez was shot to death in the garage of the family home. She had just returned home with her husband and his brother when Ruiz opened fire. Prosecutors believe the motive behind the murder was to collect insurance money. In December 2000, Michael Rodriguez escaped from prison as a member of the notorious Texas Seven. During the crime spree that followed, police officer Aubrey Hawkins was killed when he attempted to intervene in a robbery. Ruiz's last words were, "I would like to say to the Sanchez family how sorry I am. Words cannot begin to express how sorry I am and the hurt that I have caused you and your family. To my family, thank you for all your love and support. I am at peace. Jesus Christ is Lord. I love you all."